the process, and I use the language around this, that we must ensure that our agreements, the agreements we make between one another, are both clean and clear, or clear and clean.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by One Accord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
Lawrence, welcome to the Value Factory. Glad to have you on. This could be a really interesting discussion around trust building, trust between the board and executive management in a firm, trust amongst executive managers, trust amongst board members. Trust is the topic. Lawrence Lerner, glad to have you on today.
Nick, always good to be here. Good to see you. Trust is such a big deal these days. There's two components to trust, right? Character and competency. You trust the car that you're driving in because it's demonstrated that you can get from point A to point B without breaking down. It has a certain amount of gas mileage. It's comfortable when you drive it, right? That's part of the character when you buy, or why you bought the car to begin with. With people, it's not so black and white. Things happen, things are said, or you hear things. And what I've seen in the dynamics between boards and the executive management team is that everybody's trying to demonstrate or prove something. For boards, right? And a lot of times, even boards where you're a volunteer, you want to be really excited and demonstrate, look, I can do all these things for you. But that's not the job of a board, whether it's a corporate board, nonprofit, strategic board, maybe in strategic boards, depending on how you decided to organize it. But the job of a board is not to run the company. Everybody sees that on TV or in movies. The job of the board is to make sure the company is well run.
That means such a good point. I mean, so good, you got to say it again.
The job of the board is not to run the company. It's to make sure that the company is well run. And that means you have trust in your CEO, you've hired or brought on board or cultivated a CEO who is really taken the mission of the company forward and has its best interests. And again, whether that's shareholder members, if you're a credit union, if it's a closely held family business, they should be cultivating and managing that company going forward.
So I've heard trust defined as knowing someone has my best interests in mind when I'm not in the room. So if we just take that between you and me, if I know or believe that you will be acting with my best interest in mind when I'm not around, then that means that I trust you. Taken to business, I know that if you are making decisions with the best interests of One Accord in mind, then I trust you. And in order for us, you and me, you as a managing principal in the firm, me as CEO, to work together effectively, let's take Stephen Covey Jr.'s book title, into play here. We want to move at the speed of trust. If we want to work together really well, that trust is foundational. So let's go deep in that. Let's unpack. When you've seen high trust business relationships, high trust executive teams, high trust boards with their CEO, what do you see?
I see the ability to make decisions without hesitation and high performance, because that trust means I know the way that you're going to operate for the business. You are going to make decisions. You're going to make bold moves that move the needle forward for the company. You're going to open up a new territory. You're going to look at the organization and say, what makes us better than we were yesterday? What makes us, what's going to retain employees, that war on talent that we're always talking about?
Well,
go ahead.
Let's take that example that you gave. There's high trust relationship, looks like a CEO that's going to make a move? And you gave an example just a moment ago. Is it moving into a new geographical territory or an expansion of the business? Did I pick that up right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just play that scenario out. In a high trust environment, what must the CEO have done leading up to the moment when they present to the board, this is my plan for our next fiscal year. We're going to open up shop in a neighboring state. What would they have had to do before then to then deliver that proposal, it be received in a trusting environment, and then they move at that speed of trust?
Superb communication. These are the things that I'm doing with the business today. When I do my monthly reporting, my quarterly reporting, everything is on the table. It's well explained and well laid out. Here's the rationale for why we made these investments in new equipment. That's really laid out. I received last month the best report from the CIO on a company which I'm on the board. It laid out each problem statement, what she was going to do, what the root cause was, and what her timing was. It told me everything I needed to know. And she said, well, what's next? I said, you're going to go execute on this. You did everything that everybody wanted to know, and your predecessors never did that. That created trust. If she delivers on it, that raises the bar.
That's right.
Because,
but even just getting to that point, which, if you're on the board and you receive this report and she says, what's next? And your response is go execute. That's indicative of high trust. The converse, the opposite of this, low trust environment, what occurs when the executive brings a proposal to the board?
there's distrust. There's more. Well, explain to me why you haven't done this the last 3 times. Explain what didn't happen and how did you let this happen?
There's a lot more questions, aren't there? There's hesitancy. We're not moving forward. And so, okay. It's really easy to have high trust when everything goes well. When all of the business plans, the revenue numbers hit, the expense numbers hit, we have low turnover, our clients love us, there's no security incidences, there's no bad Google reviews. Like, sure,
Yeah.
if I do everything excellently, then great. So if I'm the executive, I'm just going to say, it goes without saying, I must communicate the wins and the losses. I have to communicate everything. But as the board, or as the recipient of that communication of the not so good news, how do we maintain a high trust relationship when things don't go well?
When things go sideways, I look for, first of all, if things are not going well, from a board perspective, it's how we all play well together. It's not the CIO goes, well, the CFO took my budget away, or the operations person did. Like, no, how do we work together when things go sideways? And did you have a contingency plan? If you came back and said, you know what, all of the upgrades failed and we're going to miss our date, oh my gosh. But I had a fallback plan. Here's what we're going to do. And next week, we're going to re-download the updates. We're going to put them into production, into a test production environment. Then we're going to put them into production. That creates trust because you communicated, you understood the problem. You didn't deflect the problem. You didn't push it away from, okay, you're owning this, whether you created the problem or not.
Yeah.
You are owning it. You have a plan and you thought about contingency because the world is not perfect. We all know that.
Yeah. So what I've thought of, like the framework that I use for this, I actually learned in banking school from a credit class, John Barrickman. First time I ever heard somebody talk about a boiled frog and boiling the frog, but he asked this question. He said, now what is your threshold for pain? Southern man, I love the way you deliver this. What is your threshold for pain? You kind of drew that word out. And when I was in banking, we could quantify that very easily.
Yeah.
He would just say, if you took $1 million loan loss, would that hurt? Like, yes, that would hurt. Okay. If you took a $500,000 loan loss, would that hurt? Yeah, that would hurt. $250,000. Yeah, we don't like that. $50,000. Yeah, we could handle it. 50,000. Okay. So now we're dialing in on your threshold for pain. Maybe that number's 100,000, where if the loan loss was under 100,000, nobody's going to be happy about it, but we're not going to lose sleep over it. Okay. So that now becomes the limit that I can delegate to someone and say, Lawrence, you have authority to make loan approvals up to 100,000. I trust you. You've demonstrated competence. If you take a loss under 100,000, I don't have to fire you, right? That's within my threshold for pain. So we've set that. And when that happens, and you come to me and you're like, oh, Nick, we had to charge off 30,000 for this loan that I made. Here's what happened and here's what I learned from it, right? Well, I'm just going to say, okay, yeah, thanks for reporting. Thanks for demonstrating that you understand. And we're going to move on. If, however, you come back and say, oh yeah, we just had to charge off $500,000, right? As I receive that bad news, first I'm going to check and say, all right, did you follow all the protocols? Did you do everything according to the plan that we had set out? Were there the checks and balances? And do we have to make a difficult decision here? If it's $1 million charge off, you probably know when you're coming to tell me that this is going to be our last conversation, because that's way in excess of our threshold. But here's the thing is we've established that limit so that so you're not making $1 million decision the same way you make $100,000 decision, because we've been really clear in kind of that authority. And so that from a trust perspective, I have to back that up, but we have to set really clear guidelines, guardrails. So you have full authority to act within this range. If it's outside of that, we need to have a conversation. But if it's inside of that, all good.
Even with that, what we don't do is we assume a lot of things. That your peers have $100,000 threshold. Are you telling me I have $100,000? We need to be very, very clear with each other. And this is an exact conversation that we had on the expectations and the KPIs for the CEO. Well, she put them together. Did we sit down and say, we're going to take this document that you gave us and we're going to use that to measure your performance this year? And we're going to dive into that and say, you put 5 points in, they're really well written. This is what we've agreed on. So my $100,000 limit is something you and I, however it's documented.
Oh yeah.
We went into that and said, it's $100,000 and this is the parameters around it. And when did I know that I just wrote a check for $250,000 on the bank's behalf that it was not a good loan?
Yeah.
And when did I communicate it?
The process, and I use the language around this, that we must ensure that our agreements, the agreements we make between one another, are both clean and clear, or clear and clean. So, we can say $100,000 and that's unambiguous. That's a number, right? Does that mean for a single transaction or in aggregate for a single borrower? We have to be really clear. We have to go into some of the details and the weeds there so that it's very clear. And then we would document that and we would get 2 signatures, right? Acknowledging this. But then we have to make sure that the agreement is clean. And clean is where we remove all the ambiguity. We remove that kind of space for assumption. We also remove the elements of compulsory agreement, right? So if I'm begrudgingly giving you a $100,000 limit because, you're lobbying, and I'm like, I really think it should be 50. And you're like, no, everybody else has 100. It's got to be 100. I'm like, well, you're new in the role, Lawrence. I think 50 is like what I'm comfortable with. But we get to this place where it's not a clean agreement, where we fully agree. Maybe the first time you take a loss and it's 70,000. So it's under 100, but it was over the 50 that I thought. And that agreement wasn't clean. I'm still carrying around something.
There's emotional baggage.
Yeah. And that's not fair of me. I should not have agreed to that 100,000 if it wasn't clean. So in our agreements, there's got to be a high degree of integrity too, for there to be a high trust relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it comes back to the communication, clean and clear
Yep.
and very unambiguous between all the parties. And people don't like uncomfortable silences or contention. And what we realized was we were giving into that and saying, well, she knows we don't want to argue. But no, we should be super clean and clear that this is the expectation. And we left that meeting, the one after I got the document, and I was really clean and clear with both. And they were like, so you don't have anything else to say? No, you,
Yeah.
you laid it all out. This is exactly it. And we agree. So when I see her next month, she's going to come back and she's going to go, hit the date, hit the date, and
Yeah.
that is going to raise the bar on trust.
So good. This has been a great conversation, Lawrence. I think if I'm taking away just a couple of, we'll call them nuggets from the conversation, it's communication, communication, and communication, and making sure that communication is clean, it's clear, documented, and supported by more communication.
Absolutely. It's well said.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Look
Yeah.
forward to doing it again. Okay.
Thank
Until
you.
next time.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us in the Value Factory.